This is Lady Anne, owner of KPNL Radio and hostess of the Caravan Library of Lore, and I support TESA. As an experiencer myself, I have filed my own reports with them, and the professionalism and heart they have shown my case goes above and beyond. If you have had experience, I cannot recommend TESA enough.
Hi, this is Ernie Hudson, Winston Zedmore from Ghostbusters. I want to let you know that Ryan Stacy, he's created the Experiencer Support Association, TESA. You can check them out at www.tesacan.org. Now, they investigate paranormal, UFO, and provide support to experiencers. But you can check them out at, like I said, www.tesacan.org and see for yourself if they're really Ghostbusters. I can tell you this, they are a non-profit organization. Good luck, have fun, and keep it blessed.
Good evening. You are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, a podcast by the Experiencer Support Association. TESA is a UFO, paranormal, and paracryptid investigation association. We investigate everything belonging to the global phenomenon linked to highly strange and unexplained experiences. We also connect experiencers with other experiencers, creating a safe, positive environment to engage and discuss this phenomenon without judgment, criticism, or retribution. From the land of the white rolling sands, on the southeasterly tip of Georgian Bay, to all of you listening around the world, as we simulcast live on KPNL Radio, we salute you. If you want to go back and listen to our previous episodes, go to youtube.com/the Experiencer Support Association. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring that bell to be instantly notified when we are live, not only for these episodes, but every single element TESA has to offer. On our website, tesacan.org, we have something for everyone. We have support for experiencers, data for independent researchers, and places to advertise for professional partners. This live portion of the show will run for about 45 minutes. We'll have a commercial break and then spend some time answering some of your questions in the comments. The show will continue immediately after on Patreon for our private members, so head over and become a member for the unclassified tier and receive additional content from this episode and so much more for only $7 a month. To all our Patreon members, you are awesome, and thank you for helping us heal the world. All proceeds go back into the mission and will continue to help us create educational content for you and your family. Become a member today by going to patreon.com/the Experiencer Support Association. Also, if you're joining us live on Facebook or Twitter, head over to our youtube.com/the Experiencer Support Association if you want comments read out in the chat. We're only answering questions on YouTube, so head on over, hit that subscribe button, and start chatting. If you can't stay for the entire show, don't worry. Every Monday, we will upload the audio file to our podcast network for you to take us on the go. Okay, you ready? Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Today is Thursday, March 11th, 2021, and I, Ryan Stacy, am your host this evening. Our guest for Season 3, Episode 7 is Chris Cyrus. Chris Cyrus is a cryptozoologist on the East Coast. He was born in New Jersey, and since 2006, he has gained an interest in mystery. Beginning in 2018, he launched the Venomous Fringe, a show dedicated to the discussion of cryptid and paranormal-related topics, now renamed Beyond Fringe. Chris continues to podcast and showcase the mysteries of creatures in the world. I've also been featured on this podcast, Beyond Fringe as well, and I heard that it was a good rapport. So, Chris, put on your tinfoil hat. We're about to go down a rabbit hole. How are you doing today?
Hey, good evening, Ryan. Good evening, everybody. Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on,
No
and
worries.
I'm glad to be here. And more importantly, it was also a pleasure speaking with you when we first did your interview for Beyond Fringe, and it's a blast speaking with you. So I'm very honored again. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a really good show. No, I appreciate that, and thank you for the opportunity to get the message out on your side. And now
Mm.
tonight, we're gonna talk about you. So tell me about this podcast. Like so it used to be called Venomous Fringe. So how did that come about? And then why did you change the name to Beyond Fringe? So you kept Fringe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you
Tell
know,
me about that.
when we think of fringe, we think of oddity. We think of weird things. We think of something that's rather ominous, and it could be met, determinedly discussed or theorized in so many ways. And with the venomous fringe, when we first launched that, I had a concept for discussing things weird, things unknown, and to a normal human being, they're going to find all this weird. They'll find things strange. So I launched Venomous Fringe, and I used the term venomous because I was thinking of something catchy. Because originally it wasn't going to be a show dedicated to cryptids and paranormal. It was going to be dedicated to other topics, something that's non-cryptid related, paranormal related. And I realized that the name got catchy. It stuck with people. But I also feel that when um, people view it, they might see it as perhaps something that's a little. It kind of doesn't seem to make. Kind of makes sounds a little like doesn't sound good to
Right.
put it in better context. It kinda sounds like it kinda comes off a little toxic, a little scummy, and I don't want to affiliate in that nature, and I'd rather and I took a break at the basically the, half quarter into 2020, and I came back in earlier, just literally in January of this year, and I renamed it Beyond Fringe. I changed it because I just felt it was more mature. It felt like it would make more sense because it's just something that doesn't seem to not make a lot. See, if I put venomous, I just feel that I'm coming off in a bad form, and that's something that I'm not trying to present. And even though I had that name for 2 years prior to the change, I just think it's a matter of just like when you look at it and kind of like growing up in a field, it's like you want to come off a little
You were
different.
transitioning too, and
Correct. Exactly.
everything was moving forward. So it was good to see the change. And yeah, I agree with you. Beyond Fringe, I do enjoy that over Venomous Fringe. But I mean, the Fringe is kind of, is the main part, right? The oddity, right?
The oddity of interpretation. What
Yeah.
what what is fringe? We see something that's fringe, but we also apply to that in cryptid and paranormal communities because we're always surrounded by things that are ominous.
Okay, so give me an example
Well,
that would apply then.
think about it. Like, in an examples form, right? We think of something like at the topic of ghosts. Let's
Hmm.
apply to paranormal real quick. Think of ghosts, think of shadow people, think of the hat demon, we think of demons, we think of elementals, we think of all these mysterious entities and what they are. We don't know them because we could see something and it's just rather ominous. I know that there are people that I've sat down and spoken to, I'm sure you have as well, many of time, who have told you some of the most ominous and mysterious things. And even some of those things have come off violent. I know I've interviewed somebody who's talked about poltergeist activity that was extremely violent and showed me proof, showed me some battle wounds, showed me damage that was done following one. So to the normal human being, it'd be very fringe. It'd be something that'd rather be odd, something to them. Maybe not use the word fringe. They might use another term. But I also, to kind of be a little bit of a cheapskate with it, I think the word fringe is something that's pretty clever, something that can be utilized in that kind of fashion.
Well, it's interesting because it means the same as many other words that we use that are common. So
Hmm.
you're in that category, but you're different. So you're different but familiar. And that's trendy. That's good. That's innovative. It's catchy. I like it.
Thank you. And
Okay.
may I add, I mean, beyond the tinfoil hat, I mean, listen, when I first heard that name, I that was that to me is extremely catchy. I'm a guy culture, so of course, as someone who and I think of tinfoil hat because and I understand the meaning behind it,
Mhm.
and I think that's something that is just it's very clever, and I liked it. That was another thing too I complimented on because I just think that name is just something and I even think the word beyond because beyond is such a and like another mysterious term. We think of
Mhm.
beyond, we can interpret it so many ways. So
It's interesting because we never really got into like the name of our cast as well.
right,
So like it originally came around like some thought conversation of a few people batting ideas around, and then once it was said, like it's gotta be it. That's it. There's nothing better. But as we evolved and the topics that we're getting into, it makes sense because like the tinfoil hat, when that's the stigma. Everyone who's in this must wear that tinfoil hat because you're crazy or you're all this. It kind of
mhm,
identifies us in this group. But beyond the tinfoil hat is simply going that one step further into investigating why these things are happening. So it's kind of a play on that too. Right.
absolutely.
So somebody in the comments was asking if you could turn your mic up a bit. Are you able to do
Yeah,
that?
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Brown Beard, for letting us
Is
know.
that a little better?
Let us know if that's better.
So I
Um,
could turn it up just a little bit, it's like half, it's like 50%.
yeah, no, it's all good. That sounds good to me. So, how did you become a cryptozoologist? Let's.
$1,000,000 question, right?
Well, you just be feeding off the bio, right? So I'm just curious to know,
Absolutely. Yeah,
how,
no.
right? Because that's a term that people use as well. And
Yeah. It's a
how'd that
very
happen?
good it's a very good question because as a kid, I was always drawn with monsters. I liked horror growing up. Horror to me was a very interesting outlet, and I liked how a lot of these um, movies created monsters. I also liked behind the scenes of how monsters were crafted, and so I'm familiarized with something that's scary and something that would be terrifying at a young age. And when I was much younger, I'd always watch these television shows. They'd have like reruns of unsolved mysteries. They'd have shows like In Search of, and
Mhm.
th these were like reruns, things that were aired throughout the courses of the, um, early 2000s. So, like, by 2005, 2006, I was watching all this, and I ultimately was just fascinated by a lot of the content, and sure, it was reenactments 90% of the time, while the other 10% were describing on accounts of past incidents of what people were seeing. And of course, I was alluding to paranormal and Bigfoot episodes because that was the content of a lot of their shows. So, um, I thought about it. I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. That's really crafty, and I thought that was really unique for what it is. So, I remember in my elementary school that we had like the books of like the myths and legends, and they had the paranormal stuff. They had UFO stuff. There was a book on Roswell, Area 51. I would read that, and then they had a book on a Jersey Devil, and for the children's version of Bigfoot with the fancy pictures and the one sentences that go down the road like Dr. Seuss. Um, and that also piqued my interest with it because I was like, okay, it seems like this is not just something we see on TV. It seems to be something that's more of it. And then beginning in like the early 2010s, where accessible wise, I began to really follow. There was more of a YouTube outlet for a lot of these related topics, and that's also what piqued my interest. And throughout the 2010s, I started just really taking notes of everything and thinking about all these other podcasts that have talked about it and just started forming my own original opinion on what these things are. So that was kind of the recipe for what really got me into cryptozoology was just by watching these TV shows that were rather
So now
clever.
that you've done this, have you put any field work in? Have you seen anything?
I've never seen anything, and for a lot of people, they might think, for as a cryptozoologist, like, well, you never seen anything. Well, how can you make yourself proven or whatever? I think, in a sense, that for me, I've never seen anything, but I never seen nothing yet. There are locations I've been on the I've had conversations with people where I live, and they've invited me to go places. We find dates with the pandemic. It's been a bit of a complication because everybody has different times, and of course, there are some restrictions still where I live, and at the same time, uh, I've been in locations. Thought of it as regular nature, and I'll describe that in a second, but I've never seen anything uh, in particular. Now, when it comes to nature, I can go somewhere and I will get an idea, but I know that it's nature versus Bigfoot. How you can tell a difference. You can hear sounds, you can hear dead silence, you can, hear a certain scream. But if you also do research, researching your national animals, vocalizations. I also do that too. And that's kind of something that I think anybody should really take a look into as a cryptozoologist so you don't misidentify with something then you automatically think that's a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So, that's just for me, I've not seen nothing like I've said. And to research wise, I've been in places, but of course it's left me questioning, yeah, there's something there. And 9 times out of 10, I do think that there is something there. But I also go with a group of people. If I'm in a heavy expedition, I'll go with 4 or 5 people. Or if I'm in a park, I'll go with just me or somebody else because it's not wherever we go, we're not going to be as far in because it's a park, but still. But hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, no, it's okay. I'm just everyone's got a different vibe.
Absolutely.
Everyone does things different. All the methods are the same. The very fact that you're donating any time or energy towards the research in this phenomenon needs to be recognized. And I just want to, that's good. I'm glad you do that, and it's nice to know that someone's out there looking and asking questions and challenging the beliefs too, because you don't want to, you don't just want to run off with something, right? Um,
Exactly.
so I had it kind of went all over the place, but you covered all my questions. So like it was really really good. So I'm just thinking off the cuff here, and I have a cryptid case that I'm investigating right now.
Hmm.
That I've asked our evidence board if they've seen it before, and so far nothing. But I just thought I realized it was on my desktop, but just for curiosity's sake and a little sneak peek for the kids watching live, I'm gonna share you. Um, See if I can share it. Yeah, I'm gonna share it with us, and I want to know if you've seen it before. So can you see that on the screen right now?
Yes. Yes, I do.
So this was reported as a cryptid.
Okay.
Currently investigating it, trying to understand what this may or may not be. So, with your experience, what do you think this might be?
See, the thing is that like when we see images like this, and I'm just going by from what I've followed through other outlets and what other investigators who I trust have given their insight on these type of cryptids. It kind of looks like an alien, the shaped head, and I've also heard of instances where these things could be like crawlers and or ghouls. If you go back into some of the mythology, we think of ghouls as these demon-like creatures that were essentially in modern day. A lot of people might classify from creepypastas as the rake. And just to clarify on something, I don't think the rake. I think the rake's creepypasta. I think what we're dealing with is a crawler or a ghoul. More into the open that it's a crawler, some form of something that looks demonic, but something that's like a skinny type creature with a pale type body. And this is what it kind of reminds me of. It may not necessarily be pale, but it definitely has that characteristic. Or it reminds me too of the Dover Demon, which is another well-known cryptid. It was reported in Boston, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, if I'm wrong, please correct me, anybody out there. And that's another cryptid that was resembled to look almost like an alien-like figure. But to me, that looks like something that is more of a crawler. It's a cryptid like this because I'm more familiarized with Bigfoot's, Dogman, the Goatman,
Yeah.
Lizardman reports, and like the main top tier cryptids. When we see like a cryptid like this in the field, I know a lot of people aim towards it being more of a ghoul or a crawler.
So it's interesting that you have categories for it.
Mhm.
I like that you're not giving it a name, but you categorize based on how it looks. What do you think about the webbed feet and webbed hands? What would that kind of? That mean it's aquatic? Like what are we working with here?
That's a thing too, because then that's where we kind of break into this question of like, is it an extraterrestrial? Could it have a could it be an alien? Could it be even something extremely like a skinwalker or something? Something
Could it
that
be all the above?
it could be. But the thing is too, and I will admit this, is that when I look at cases like that image right there, I it's hard to really put an answer to because it's hard already in that categories, whether ghoul, skinwalker, or crawler. You know, there's not a lot of information besides what we know from textbooks or Wikipedia. I'd rather go through textbooks first about ghouls, though, before Wikipedia because there's more information, especially the old European mythology books that describe them well. And to go further, when we look at the hands, we look at the structure of it. Like
Mhm.
I said, it kind of looks like it could look like an extraterrestrial, but I there's something I because for me, and I could talk about my belief, what I think most cryptids are, but um, I do have an open mind, and I do know of paracryptid. We talked about this also on the podcast interview I did with you,
Mhm.
about paracryptids, and if we're not looking at a crawler, if we're not looking at some form of skinwalker that's of a vengeful spirit,
Mhm.
then maybe this is a paracryptid. This could be something,
I really like that you associated that because that's what I was leading into because that is a term that we're trying to introduce
right,
so it fits, right? It's just simply it's like a cryptid, but it's not normal. The term para, right, like paranormal, and
right.
so it's a paracryptid. It's got to fit. So like that's awesome. So on that, I guess with your experience, what other types of cryptids do you think would fit in that paracryptid category?
Ah, man. Uh, it's interesting because we talked about this a little bit too, also on the podcast, and
Mhm.
it made me think about it too, especially. But I also thought about it for even before that. I remember I really thought about this kind of being the case that maybe the Mothman could be a
Mhm.
paracryptid, something that's a super cryptid, but a paranormal cryptid that has supernatural or spiritual like attributes. And I only classify it as that too because of not just of the red eyes, but if we look at a lot of the books, like the textbooks, the stories, the Mothman Prophecies by John Keel, for example,
Yep.
we talk about these series of events that are focused on things that were occurring that were paranormal related leading up to the bridge collapse, Silver Bridge collapse in 67, where people were seeing this thing and there were also paranormal occurrences. There was paranormal activities in certain hotels, at homes. One of the Mothman eyewitnesses had a poltergeist activity occurring once she had seen this creature and there was strange lights in the sky. So there was all this events transpiring, and it seems like this cryptid was also the center focal of it too. So I felt that in paracryptid for the Mothman would be something that is of a spiritual descent. Maybe it's an omen, maybe it's something demonic. We don't know
So the
necessarily.
Mothman's interesting because it also ties into UFOs, like the super spectrum. That's it's got
Mhm.
the hat trick. You got a cryptid, you got paranormal, and you got UFO sightings too.
That's the other thing too. Like, we have the UFO connection to it too, because there was sightings in West Virginia, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, when that was happening, and then also too, there's been a series of UFO reports off and on all throughout the recent years of the U.S. Mothman's been recently reported a lot in Chicago, and there have been some Chicago UFO sightings. So it makes me wonder. It's like, is there some bigger connection spiritually with these type of cryptids? And that's just for the Mothman. There's so much.
If there was a connection, would that help explain it or justify its
I
existence?
think so, and I think because, right now in cryptozoology, I think one of the big problems we face is everybody has a different opinion on what these things could be, but we can't give one answer because it's not gonna be to them or to the other the right answer, and that's okay sometimes. We can always be constructive on that, but it's because also too, I feel that because there's so many theories on things, we lose central focus, and if we had more, like, revelate like, discussion, more field work done with Mothman, more, people diving into things with it, that if they were to say, "Okay, well, we've discovered this, it connects to that. This is no way this can be any different, 100% supernatural." That's all I think would be said, and I think that would be the closing books for a lot of other cryptid topics as well.
Mhm.
We especially when we talk about cryptids like goatmen or lizardmen, and those are cryptids that I'm skeptical of in a sense, and we can talk about that if you wish, but,
Sure.
um
Why are you skeptical of the lizard man and goat man?
well, originally, when I first got into all of this, I remember I heard about the whole lizard man case in South Carolina involving a young man who had an occurrence in '88 with seeing something that approached his car and almost like attacked him into the car. And I'm skeptical because in recent years, I kind of think we're dealing with something that's maybe not a scalene reptilian looking creature, and maybe I'm wrong. This is just my opinion, of course, but I only think that it's hard to take in an unidentified creature that's like very reptilian, very tall, 9 feet, scalene, kind of like an alligator crocodile, or some sort of gecko like hybrid, and somehow manifest in the swamp. I've often heard some people mention, and it could be a Sasquatch that was badly burned
Yeah.
and comes off as a scalene looking creature. Now, there's also occurrences where this reported lizardman had also torn apart the front bumper of a woman's car in 2007, and that she had like feline cats in the backyard. They all vanished. But the bite marks and the claw marks, that was something that was extremely rather it was interesting because there was photograph evidence of it. And you know, I feel that Bigfoot wouldn't do such a thing, but if it's an aggressive type cryptid, one that's rogue, and I use the word rogue because I feel that some are loners and some will have aggression to them for that whatever nature, that yeah, they'll do abnormal things, but at the same time, I also think that if it was some reptilian cryptid, that we would be kind of getting like the predator syndrome where we would be getting like proof of it, like blood, if it
Mhm.
has like a certain blood color or footprints, certain things that can report it and send off as okay, this is different, not just another Bigfoot print, but rather a um, scalene reptilian print. As for the goat man, it reminds me so much, and I'm gonna compare it to like the mythology um, that we know of, like the goats, the hybrids, like the half goat, half man. I forgot the name. I hate to say it. It's so sad because I'm a cryptozoologist. I don't know the name of it, but it's in a certain mythology, and it's like the half man, half beast. Um, and I,
Minotaur, Pan.
the Minotaur, I think it may be, yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing with that is that it has a very complicated origin, much like the lizard man. The origin of the goat man, there's a couple stories. There talks about, of course, the infamous breeding between a goat and some sort of hybrid, like human, not like human, I'm sorry, uh, some other mammal that had conceived this hybrid, like bipedal creature. Um, this was a creature that was apparently conceived in a lab by a mad scientist. That's one of the other origin stories that are talked about with the goat man. I've done an episode on the goat man and the lizard man also, and I don't really talk about a lot because there's not a lot of information on the background. And I think that's why I'm really skeptical is because it just kind of something that just popped out of nowhere. And it went on a show. I think the Goat Man was a subject on Mountain Monsters. And it's those type of reality TVs, while they could be entertaining, I know it gets a lot of people talking. It's a lot of people going into mythos of things.
Hmm.
And I just feel that for something that has been reported to will and acts as well, that why aren't dogmen or Bigfoots doing the same thing? So that's
So
why I'm skeptical of those two.
so Alex Mistretta is our resident cryptozoologist. He's the one on our team that we use currently.
Hmm.
He explains the separation of paracryptids and cryptids as anything that doesn't, I guess, match a biological standpoint. So it's like it wouldn't biologically doesn't make sense. Like a well, then again, a platypus, was a cryptid
Right.
for a while until they found one. Um, so this is kind of a loaded question because they're just always going back and forth. So Alan, there is that belief with Bigfoot that he is. So where do you sit on the fence of Bigfoot being um, a cryptid, not connected to UFO or paranormal activity, or possibly somewhere connected to the paranormal spectrum? And if so, how and why?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I know it's one that also too. This is one of those type of questions that it's open ended, but will have an opinionated answer too, because even the most veteran researchers now are also still changing their perspectives on what Bigfoot is.
Mhm.
And this is the same thing with me. I originally assumed it was a supernatural entity that was of a Native American spirit that formed its own coalition along with these others that were like dead natives that had been reincarnated as hairy men. And this was the original thought I thought about. This is pre 2015. So this is what I initially thought of. And then by 2015, listening to some podcast, I just thought of him as just a Native American spirit with these integrities as the wild men. And the same rule applied to over in Europe and Australia with those respected origins because those have different ones. They have wildmen in Europe and Yowies in Australia as the Bigfoot equivalent. And their mythology is a bit more complex too, especially Europe's mythology on it. Um, and supernatural wise, I think because when we hear a lot of reports of Bigfoot, right, we hear a lot of them being they'll run into you, they'll run away from you, they'll stare at you, they'll chase you out of their territory, you know, and then we think, well, maybe these creatures could be evil, meaning demonic.
Mhm.
They chase us territories, they do tree knocks, they'll do mimicking. Infrasound has also been a factor, and there's this big debate on it because, of course, people.
Yeah, I know. Like, I mean, until we catch one, we'll never know which way or another. And I mean, I as the I have to be unbiased in this investigation. Like when I investigate anything and accept the possibility of it being either way, but I have to look. I have to look at the
Right.
evidence on the cases. So all the Bigfoot, we don't have too many Bigfoot cases that have been reported to us. Um, but there's no indication of any UFO or paranormal connection, at least that I can make, or at least through the language as well. But I do remember always hearing, I don't hearing like that there was orbs, and then there was crafts, and then there was, some sort of psychic connection or communication with it. Maybe perhaps another being that's communicating with whatever creature the Bigfoot may be. That would be a little better, a more easier interpretation to understand how it all works together, which still keeps Bigfoot separate as human or some sort of terrestrial being, I suppose. Are you familiar with the Sumerian myth of Enkidu?
Familiarized very briefly. I've not really dug too much in it, but
So,
what is it? What's
well, that's the farthest back that I can trace the Bigfoot
origin story, I suppose. Yeah, remember too, the Epic of Gilgamesh talks about King Gilgamesh, who's half, I guess, half alien, half human. Um, and he wanted to. He was the king that refused to die. He wanted to live forever, and in order to live forever, he went on this quest to find the land of, what's it called? I have to refresh my Sumerian. Jesus, Shinar. Anyway, with the land of the rockets to find a way to heaven, to find a way to God, so that way he's able to live for eternity, because he sees place of the landing. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Anyways, before he embarks on this journey, as an aid, he was given by Enki, which was the lord of the earth, which is the Sumerian equivalent for God, which is now something completely different. But this being called Enkidu was Enkidu, being of Enki, and the description of it was a hairy ape-like figure that resembled Bigfoot, or this creature that we call Bigfoot. So with that, the story continues, or the epic continues, with them fighting each other at first, and then Gilgamesh was able to had to bend a knee, I believe. I think Enkidu won. I gotta remember. So there was this story, like that Aboriginal kind of context of like some being, and then them fighting a human, and then there's that humanism and workmanship together. But then all of a sudden they embarked on this mission together and worked together as partners. And later on throughout the journey, Enkidu dies, and Gilgamesh is sad because they became friends. But when you look at pictures of this being, it resembles what we call Bigfoot. And not saying it is, could be something different. But the interesting thing is that it was sent from the heavens. It was sent from God. So God, that's the most important part in that epic, is that where it came from, the origin. So I think that part might be the root of why people think UFOs and paranormals are connected and are connected to Bigfoot. However, I guess my question for you now would be, do you think it's possible that there is a similar being that's not Bigfoot that might be misidentified or misinterpreted as this paranormal connection?
The only one I would think is either a skinwalker or a Wendigo,
Yeah,
and the and I only think because of when I look at the Native American legend and what a Wendigo is, and the type of shamans and voodoo, or not voodoo, but like the magic um, that is put amongst that. That to me is something that would be misidentified. We've often made these comparisons with skinwalkers as well, the ability to
Mhm.
shapeshift into another entity, whether a Bigfoot, Dogman. We've often, I know for a lot of people um, who have thought about this as well. But I wanted to add this to what I think Bigfoot is, because this is something that I was going to add to. 2015-ish wise, I thought of it as something that was Native American spirit, something also prior was supernatural, and the UFO connection, because I've heard cases of people who've seen flashing lights in the sky before a Bigfoot encounter, or have seen a Bigfoot, but there was a foggy mist that was colorized. Same with Dogman, and that there was a UFO sighting minutes later. And uh, but I've also, and this is where it's been controversial with some people, especially those in the field who study it from a different perspective. I don't think it's a paracryptid. I think it could easily be a flesh and blood or a natural creature. I've had the ability, like I've mentioned, I spoke to a couple of investigators in my hometown who have told me interesting cases with some of these eyewitnesses they've been in contact for years with, about having them come from the wood line, come from the wood, and come and greet, and they wouldn't be so docile or aggressive or something demonic that some people might report. And there's like a connection. So he's been convinced, this one investigator, that it's a natural creature. And I've also thought about it too, because if these creatures can leave hair, they leave scat, they leave forms of their DNA. If people have shot at it and it's bled, then I don't think a demon or a paranormal creature
Mhm.
would leave a trace of that, or if it leaves footprints, it wouldn't leave footprint. But I do think that they are sighted, but think sometimes we're not dealing with a Bigfoot in some of those sightings. I think it's something else, maybe a human
So
Wendigo.
there's some good conversation going on in the chat, and I'm just actually that was the next question I was going to kind of get to too. So Brownbeard, thank you for bringing that up. Um, the problem we're having, even with this conversation, is we're using terms that were given to these creatures that label characteristics. So Bigfoot is simply Bigfoot because the footprints are big. Sasquatch, geographical area in Canada, we call it Sasquatch. So it very is could be different species. It could be totally different things altogether. But if we remove the labels, we remove these titles, Dogman even could be part of that genome or that grouping. If you broke it down and looked at the characteristics, what makes sense to you?
What would make sense if we look at it, we would have to, and this is a thing that's happening now in the community for every cryptid, is its spiderweb effect of decoding what is what, because then we would have more questions than answers if we were to automatically assume that they were flesh and blood because of stories like I've mentioned. Yes, for some people out there who think a bit deep with it, it's nothing wrong with it. And this is also something that's part of a learning experience on my end because I'm still learning. And adding all these other things into it, it when we break everything down, it's gonna be where one person will have to believe it and take that idea and opinion and stick with it out of the others in the camps who might say otherwise towards it. It's hard to really say is really the answer because even though that these cryptids have been discussed for years, decades, centuries, we're reached the pinnacle point where we're finally getting some form ground of it. You have investigators from the 60s, such as Gimlin, Peter Byrne, um, people like Ivan Marks or Grover Krantz, who studied these things scientifically. Lauren Coleman being another one. They studied them scientifically. They did all measurements, castings, everything. And then entered the digital age nearly half a century later. We have people who say that they're paranormal, supernatural because of reported portal sightings or the, the lights, for example, and the sudden disappearances and something with cloaking. People have brought this assumption of cloaking like Predator as a form of invisibility and a form of vulnerability that is often been intimidated for the public.
So, yeah, when all these things are going on at the same time and nobody
Right.
knows how to explain a single element of that, it makes it very difficult to discern. One more question before we go to our commercial break is: what is your opinion on the Patterson footage?
Very good question because
So
it's always been a
that's also
question.
controversial.
Very controversial. Uh, the simple answer is I think it's a very convincing film, one that for 54 years later, we're still trying to figure the truth on. But I think what we're dealing in that footage is a Bigfoot. And why I say that is because I look at that footage left and right. When I first looked at it, I was puzzled at it. I kind of was skeptical. I didn't really think it was too interesting. But then when I played it back more and more, I began to think, okay, this thing has weird shape to it, has a weird form. And keep in mind, this is 67. So, Ape Costume Design in 67, we think Planet of the Apes. We think of the original. We think of like how King Kong was utilized and used in his movie, and as well as other films of that time that have used apes or primates as a central focus. And this is, of course, different time period in the U.S., different time period in our world. So the clothing line, everything, the fabrics are different. There's just something about the cloak, the way it looks, the coat of hair that we see in that footage, it's black, and then you see like a bit of the face, and we look at 1,000 artist renditions, but I don't think that's it's hard to really show off a look on it, especially if even though it's at a far distance, the way the movement is, the way it paced, the way it looks at Patterson Gilman, I don't think it has any featurettes to anything human. I feel that there would be more complication if it was a human in a suit.
So interesting enough, Tim is our demonologist. So Tim, the demon guy, Morrison, in the office today, we were doing some research on that, and Tim's on the belief that it may be a hoax. And in terms of looking for that, we read an article today that allegedly has a testimony from the guy who sold the suit to the guy that was wearing it. And we're kind of, we haven't looked into it to see if it's credible or not. We just learned this today. But, having the guy say he sold the suit to the guy and saying it's a hoax a few years later, like, have you heard that? And if so, what would the motive be for that if it was a lie?
Yeah, I heard about that. I forgot who admitted it was a hoax or who it came forward with that with the suit. Bob Gilman seems to be the only one from that incident in '67 that's alive to this day to tell the story. And because Bob Gilman has a huge following, and I have respect for Bob, but he'll always go about the way he talks with the film and says that it was real. That he was there that day with Roger and he had seen it, and there's a lot more to it. And that's why when you hear that, then you hear the guy that came forward. Bob has talked about it for years, and the guy coming forward's only talked about it when he officially talked about it in a time period where many years have gone by. And this goes back to also the controversy of the discussion of the Bluff Creek Massacre, which was a follow-up to the Patterson Gilman film. But to basically add on, to answer the question shortly, I think that it's an interesting testimony, but I think because it's something that has been recent and something that is a bit more strewed compared to many years of Bob Gilman talking about the film, that I think it's one of those things where we go back and forth with the film being a hoax because people pinpoint about the movement or the way it was shot, that it was shot because there's more to the footage. Like the footage, what we see in that like 15-second frame,
Mm-hmm.
Roger and all them, they were filming for more than that. They just caught it in the sequence. So they just go about it in a certain fashion.
It comes down to the experiencer. As long as we can believe the testimony of the person who saw it, that should be enough for us to investigate. Everything else after that is speculation. If there's any reason to not trust the experiencer, then we can look into that. But if he's credible, if he's had a following, if he's had all this stuff and people believe it because of him sharing the story to some people, I think the motive, if it is possible, again, we haven't looked into it, just again having to balance the possibilities so we can understand the phenomenon. Many years later, there has to be a motive. Maybe he wanted to get famous. Maybe he, look at his business to see if his business was failing. He wanted to make some money off it. We have to follow the money. And I think that's what Tim's on, to kind of see if there's money involved. But we got to head to commercial. I just want to let everybody know in the chats, those of you guys that are watching live, if you see that Chantel and I have been hashtagging TESA merch, you need to type hashtag TESA merch so that way your name gets entered into a draw to win a $50 gift card for the Paranormal Hangar at the end of this month. All right, we're starting something new, but you're commenting, but make sure you just comment TESA merch right now or before the end of this video, so your name can be entered to the draw. Okay, so I'll read my spiel here. We'll pause right here, but we'll continue after a message from our professional partners. Also, you are listening to this live on KPNL Radio or a future podcast. Head over to youtube.com/the Experiencer Support Association to see the videos that are going with the audio, which includes that interesting cryptid that we saw earlier tonight. So remember, you are watching Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, a podcast by the Experiencer Support Association, and we'll be right back.
Ryan is one of Canada's leading new UFO investigators. He conducts and oversees UFO investigations on a constant basis and was really taken by his research. He's compiled a tremendous amount of data regarding UFOs in Canada. And just as interesting, he really goes over how UFO investigations are done and what are some of the mistakes that people make when they submit evidence. Note for starters, don't edit your videos or photos before you send them. If you want to hear more follow-up conversation between Ryan and myself, you can go to richardolanmembers.com, where we have a candid conversation on ufology, the paranormal, and more. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other.
The same thing that draws aliens to our planet is the same thing that draws us to others. Exploration, curiosity, sustainability of life. That's why we go. It would make sense as to why they're visiting here.
Travis! Quit playing around, man. Get back here. Travis!
The last thing I remember was this numbing shock. Stunning sort of a feeling. Very powerful.
Get away from me!
I was just out of my mind with fear, just screaming the whole time.
It's been theorized that aliens prefer remote areas because they don't want to attract attention. Whatever it is that they're doing, they would want to do that in a less populated area. There are multiple accounts of the same thing from people from all over the world. People that do not know each other, do not live in the same cultures, and they're all looking up, they're all seeing things in the sky. So it would be naive of us to think that we're alone in the universe.
My mission is to assist and help those experiencing this phenomenon in such a way that they're able to continue and live with it, and also in a way that it can be measured, quantified, and reinforced within today's society, so that way it can be accepted and no longer viewed in a negative way. One thing that I do value in people is the ability to sense and feel when something is right and when something is wrong. That is a natural ability that we all share. Now, when we combine that with the paranormal and ufological abductions or visits, I have this sensation that these abilities are connected. Not everyone can sense, not everyone can feel. However, those who can are typically connected with something that we cannot explain. And part of my research is not just to investigate the experience, but it's also to understand and study the experiencer to find out what they have in common with other experiencers, to try to figure out what the actual makeup is in order to be on that spectrum. There's a lot of it happening all over the world, and I do not know of any other study that is focusing on the individuals as people, only the phenomenon. Welcome back. You are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. If you're enjoying the episode so far, head over to patreon.com/Experiencer Support Association and join the unclassified tier for only a few bucks a month. Your membership will get you at least an extra half hour of this conversation, along with a bunch of other perks for becoming a TESA Insider. Also, if you have experienced an unexplained event involving paranormal, extraterrestrial, dogman, or any other paracryptid, head over to tesacan.org/reporting system. The more reports we get, the more we will understand the phenomenon and how it affects our people. Let the others who have already reported be that example that proves that we are making a difference. If it wasn't for these reports, we would not be able to do what we do, and for that, we thank you. I am still here with Cyrus, our guest this evening, and we will dive into the comments. If anybody has any questions for Chris, please ask them now. We have we're a little bit over time, but we've got a few minutes of leeway that we can work with before Patreon. So hello, Chantel. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Brown Beard, KPNL Radio. Emma's mom. I saw you there. Yep. Hello. And anybody have a question? Chantel asked what the weather was. What's the weather like for everyone? Ontario has floods and freezing rain. Yes, we do. What's your weather like over there, Chris?
Very warm.
Very warm.
Total opposite.
Yeah. What's
We had a very warm day by us today, but unfortunately, it's going to be cold tomorrow. So.
Okay. You're in New Jersey, or where are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I can't believe we never talked about the New Jersey Devil. Why didn't we talk about that?
Jersey Devil, I mean, it's a very interesting cryptid too. That also too could be a paracryptid as well.
So let's talk about that in the Patreon special.
Sure thing.
We'll head over to Patreon and talk about New Jersey Devil, the guy from New Jersey. So some of the comments earlier, Emma's mom had mentioned when we were looking at the cryptid that it looked like a goblin. Lisa had said an elemental spirit. Brown Beard asks, Ryan, what other characteristics come with the investigation? Is there mannerisms or something else that seems to only be connected by this drawing? Well, this particular case is still under investigation. I don't have my notes in front of me, so I can't give you the specifics. However, it is part of the 2020 survey that has to be done by this Saturday. If you're a Patreon member, I will be showing that to our Patreons at 4 p.m. Eastern time as a Patreon special to give them a sneak peek. If not, you're going to have to wait till the report's done, and then I can give you some details there. So you guys are just chatting with each other, which is good. I think we covered all that. Nope, no questions, no general questions. So, okay, well, if anybody's got a question, ask it now. Let's talk a little bit about the Jersey Devil. Let's just fill the time with that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, the Jersey Devil is definitely one of those cryptids out there that is very popular, not just in New Jersey, but I know that there's a lot of people in the South, the U.S., who are studying it as well. There is a guy I know who wrote a book about it, and he was from Kansas. He gave his initial opinion on it, and I mentioned it could be a paracryptid too because the story of the Jersey Devil focused basically on mythologies. The way the myth goes is reportedly there was a woman who had 12 children, and she reportedly cursed that the child 13th would be a demon or a devil, and she'd give birth to this devil-like creature that would transform into this basically like a baby, like a mini devil, and flew out the chimney, and from then on was declared this mysterious cryptid known as the Jersey Devil. And throughout the course of, and this was in 1735, just to add on to the date. So in the last 250, almost not that lied, 285 years, we've dealt with this report of something roam in the woods of New Jersey. People have incited that the Pine Barrens will see something of that nature. I think, for one, that a paracryptid such as that if it has this, I do believe there are flying hominids. I would also put Mothman in that category too, because of the way it's built, the structure. Same with the Jersey Devil. It's a flying hominid, but it could be a flying hominid with paranormal attributes. And I think the paranormal comes in because of its mythology. It's where its origins from, and from the fact that this creature doesn't resemble anything typical of a normal flying animal. Doesn't have any characteristics of a crane or a bird, a crow.
KPN Radio says Mother Leeds was the woman's name. It's also
Right.
known as the Leeds Devil or the Leeds Child.
There are people too that are in like the Pine Barrens who are residents of certain like areas, because Pine Barrens expands 1.1 million acres, so it's all throughout the state of New Jersey. But residents who are in like woodlands that are declared off the Barrens, they will say that they've never seen. Some will say they've seen it. Some will say they've never seen it. And some residents around some of the barren areas that live in some of the communities and neighborhoods, they'll say they've seen it, not seen it. But those who have seen it, they'll always come back saying they do not know what the hell it is because it's just something so abnormal.
Do you remember reading the parts with the families on the possibility of them making something up just to attack the other family for the almanacs or something like that? Is it Benjamin Franklin? No,
I, I,
the almanac.
you know, I think the thing is like, and this goes for all cryptid stories too. I do think that there are some that are hoaxes. I do think that people do make things up because they want to hear their voice, or if they want to go ahead and just say, "Hey, listen, be part of the trend." Hey, I had a dog encounter. Hey, I had a Jersey Devil encounter, and it's very easy for somebody to play a prank on people. You could play a prank by doing doing an eyewitness account, and that person can do the prank on you, hoodwink you into a story that could be very plausible because we're investigators. We have these ability, like we have to take everything with an open mind, but with a grain of salt too when it comes to specific cases. I've had people share with me cases that do come off skeptical, and I've been very curious of, but not never really published or shared because of my skepticism, because of the fact that it just didn't seem real to me.
Right.
Um, so in this case, if families would be making things up, it's possible, but at the same time, I think it's hard to really pinpoint it unless you really like. And I also think, and this adds into it, like I think people who are cryptozoologists, if there is a thing of doing, even with paranormal researchers too, I think taking a course in psychology is such a good thing to use and recommend because that way you can really tell how somebody could really mess with you and how they can lie to you if you pick up on certain mannerisms or even body language, how you can tell the difference.
You can even lie to yourself. I think, therefore I am. So like, but so it's good that when you measure it on an individual, just kind of plug into our data set, which is about to come out. Reason why we display the table and show you. The end of the year is very good for us when I can actually look at all these individual cases that I've done, but then table them to compare them, and then have a really good reading of what the average is. So certain characteristics, like the phenomenon, will be lower, and then some will be high, and then we can kind of start to profile and characterize this. So with a situation like this, if New Jersey Devil is your thing, you want to table all the stories. You want to table all the facts. This is like PI pro tip. Basically take all their statements and write down the who, what, where, when, colors, height, and all the other characteristics from every single interview, and then do a graph and see what's common. And the ones that are common are more than likely your true, like the truth, because that broken telephone game, everything could be kind of skewed, especially when there's fear and all these other emotions in there. So before we leave, Chris, please tell everybody where they can find your podcast so they can continue listening to you and all these other cryptid stories and adventures that you have.
Sure. I am the host of Beyond Fringe, show dedicated to cryptid and paranormal-related topics. You can find it on YouTube. I'm on social media as well. Feel free to check out the Facebook, as well as also too, guys. If you want to find the Twitter, I'm under Christopher Cyrus. I post a variety of things, but cryptid and paranormal topics are the main discussion, especially Beyond Fringe. So you can reach me from there, and if you do have a cryptid encounter, or you would like to get in contact with me in general, discuss feedback and reference to things, cryptid paranormal related, you can reach me at Beyond Fringe Official at Outlook.com. That again is Beyond Fringe Official at Outlook.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So we will see you guys over in the Patreon side. Remember, EA is this Saturday, so Experiencers Anonymous. If you haven't got your ticket for that, it's free. Just got to sign up in Eventbrite so you get the Zoom link. We will be putting out a reminder email tomorrow, so you guys can get the last minute tickets if you need that. Again, if you're not a Patreon member, you can get the Zoom ticket to see the sneak peek of the preview for $15 if you want to pay for that. But it's cheaper if you become a Patreon member, because you get that as well as the extra hour or so that we're about to dive into, and a whole bunch of other things. So, it depends on, what your value is, or what's, all that other fun stuff. But if this is good enough for you, this is all you get. And we're going to head over and hang out with the Patreon members who are funding this and allowing us the opportunity to do this. So thank you, Chris, once again, and I will see everybody in Patreon. Thanks for watching. Keep your eyes in the sky. Heed the world.
Tonight's episode was brought to you by the Paranormal Hangar, the official merchandising store of the Experiencer Support Association. Head over to theparanormalhangar.com and browse our inventory. We have branded mugs, mouse pads, tote bags, and so much more. All proceeds go back into the organization, and if you are a Patreon member, you will get a discount code for all of your purchases. Remember, this conversation isn't over, just the free version. We'll dive even deeper on patreon.com/the Experiencer Support Association. Thanks for listening. Keep your eyes in the sky and say it with me. Heed the world. Good night, everybody.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, where together, my friends, we own the night. On our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a place called the SOR Sightlines Report. All of our investigations and people who inquire are turned over to TESA, the Experiencer Support Association. Ryan Stacy and his crew, what I like about them, they're independent. They're not working for anybody, and they want answers. We want answers for our listeners and people who inquire as well about their experiences. It's a great tandem, and we love being teamed up with TESA. If you haven't heard of us before, that's okay. We'd love to earn your listening ears. Join us 9:06 Pacific Time, 12:06 a.m. Eastern for 3 hours of live entertainment, 7 days a week.
We are the ones in the dark. We are the first on the scene. We are the last to leave. We will counsel you. We will comfort you. We will save your life. We are the unsung. We are the underdogs.